The visual pricing process is a proven method to help you price any home, anywhere, any time of the year. It is a very simple, easy to follow process that once you kind of learn it, helps you master pricing at all times. It's so simple, but it's so powerful. So step 0, before we even start the visual pricing process, we have to actually have a home to price. So for today's example that we're going to walk through and show you this actual 9-step process, here are the details of the home we will be looking at. So first off, this house is a 2-story home that is just under 3,000 square feet, and it is a neighborhood of Fort Collins called Rigdon Farms. Now, a couple of key little important things to point out about this house is that it does have a couple of condition issues. It was hit by hail, and so it's in the middle of being repaired, as well as the inside could use some fixing up. But other than that, that's kind of the only real features outside of that that's going to stand out in this neighborhood. So this is our basic home we're looking at. Now, if you were doing a full CMA, you probably would go ahead and pull this up on Google Maps or look at public records to get all the information you possibly can. But for today's example, let's go ahead and start with this. So let's jump into step 1, which is the Pricing MLS Search. So for step 1, the Pricing MLS Search, we're going to go with the standard search criteria that we kind of recommend because Rigdon Farms is a great, well-platted neighborhood. So we're going to look at Rigdon Farms, the last 2 years, all status activity, and go ahead and export that. Simple as that. That is our Pricing MLS Search done. Now I exported that to my desktop, and we're going to jump into step number 2 now of loading that into the visual pricing system. Okay, so as we go to load this in, we're going to first open up the visual pricing system, which you can see here. I'm going to click Enable Macros. If you're on a PC, you might see a message that says Enable Content, but they both accomplish the same thing. Click Visual Pricing. Click the Start Here button, and I'm going to select that we are in Northern Colorado, and then find that export on our desktop or wherever yours saved. Mine is right here as Rigdon Farm. Give this a couple seconds. Rigdon Farms in Fort Collins, yes. And it now automatically will create our pattern graphs for us, and it is loaded into the visual pricing system. You can see here that the odds are created. Go ahead and zoom in here a little bit better. You can see that the time to sell and the buying pattern are also created. One thing I do want to make sure and point out here, this search was done on March 26th, 2019. I am using older data for this search, kind of give you a good example with data that we can check on after the fact. That being said, we've already accomplished step number 2 and loaded it into the visual pricing system. So let's jump on to step number 3 now and create a correlated scattergram. A correlated scattergram is basically a scattergram where the trend line and the dots match up. There are cases where you'll see a scattergram with a trend line and the sold property dots are all over the place. It looks like a shotgun blast went off. That usually means that the data is not correlated and we have to kind of refine either our search or in many cases the data being selected for that scattergram. But in most cases it's really simple. So let's go ahead and click on visual pricing here. Click over to the pricing, which opens up our MLS data. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in again just so you can see it. Click Create Graph Options. Click Select Data. And I'm just going to select the closed properties. Now this date here is 6 months old from when the search was created. Now if you automatically upload your search, this number will self-populate to 6-month-old data. So I'm going to click Select as our base option. And you can see in the background here that a number of properties have been selected. I'm going to click Create Graph, and I do want to show the fair market value trend line. Click OK, and there we have it. Here's our first scattergram. Now looking at this, you can see that we are pretty well matching the fair value trend line, and so we're going to go ahead and say that this scattergram is correlated. That was very simple to do and pretty easy to accomplish. So now let's move on to the next step and find what we call the comparative base price. A comparative base price essentially is just saying we're going to find a price that both fits the fair market value trend line and fits when we compare it to the other properties on the graph. Now, we call it a base price because we'll start at that price once we kind of compare it with special features, amenities, and condition to other sold properties. But then we're going to take that base price and then go into positioning. So first, let's go ahead and find that comparative price. Now, again, I've said here at the start, we're about 3,000 square feet, but we do have some condition issues. So looking at 3,000 square feet, we can see we're probably going to be somewhere around the 430-ish range according to the market trend line here. Now, these three dots here, here, and here are kind of our closest gauge on what's going on in the market. So first, let's look at this guy. Looking at this one, it's way above the trend line. Now, why is that? Now, it's pretty easy to figure that out if we go back to the data sheet here. That one was 3,124 square feet, which is this property right here. You can see here, that is a 5-car garage, as well as a much bigger acreage as far as properties go. You can see that 515, quarter of an acre, where a lot of the other properties, such as the one that, let me switch back here for a second, sold down here at 415. If we go ahead and look at that sold price of 415, we'll find it is this Des Moines property right here. It's got less than the 1/5 of an acre, so moving up to a 1/4 acre, and then having a 5-car garage compared to 2-car, you can see why in this area that's going to probably jump way up. Now, looking at the graph here, this property that I just talked about that sold at 415 compared to this property, there's one clear distinction. This property here, which sold at 415, is pretty kind of the way it was built. Hasn't been fixed up, hasn't been modernized, but still in pretty decent shape. This property, which is above the line, has been completely gutted and replaced with new stainless steel appliances and really refinished from head to toe. So that being said, us being here and knowing that we're really not fixed up, we're kind of in a negative situation, we're probably going to be at the line or just below it. So what this gives us is probably a fairly accurate comparative base price of 425 range. So let's go ahead and take that as our starting comparative base price. Now, to go into our positioning search, we're going to take that and make a couple adjustments. So with the comparative base price of 425,000, what we want to do is find the information and find the data out there of our competition that we're going to be positioning against. Again, it's a base price because we start at 425, but we want to position up or down depending on our competition that we're going to have to try and beat to try and reach those buyers correctly. Now, the basic rule, we're going to take that comparative base price and go up by 5% and down by 5%. Now, 5% of 425,000 is 21,250. So if we were going to exact numbers, we probably would be, somewhere around the 403,750 range. Realistically, when we go down to that bottom price that we're looking for, no one's going to be searching for that. So what you want to do is find bridge prices where people will actually be searching. So let's go ahead and say, in this case, we're going to look for prices in the range from 400,000 to 450,000, which is pretty much right around that 5% range that we're going to be looking for from that 425. These are called bridges, and they're really powerful, so you want to make sure that we include where other listings will be as well as where buyers will search. So we're going to take that, and now that we have that property kind of price range, that's what we're going to be competing against. Buyers are out there searching for homes, and they're looking for price ranges, not just areas. Sure, they can have a favorite neighborhood or a favorite location, but in many cases, they'll search otherwhere when they have that same kind of price. So we're using that to find our competition. We're going to look for all status activity as well in that price range, and we're going to go ahead and go with Southeast Fort Collins. Now, in many cases, you can just do the city, so we would just say Fort Collins, but Southeast Fort Collins during this time period was really an area of growth, and kind of all the momentum of the market was there. So comparing Southeast Fort Collins to our downtown area doesn't really make sense. And this is one of those areas where knowledge of your location will be invaluable to help you with your pricing. So once we've done that search, we're going to export it, save that to our downloads or to our desktop, and jump on to the next step and load that into the visual pricing system. So now that we've done our positioning search, it's time to bring that positioning data back into the visual pricing system. Now this step is also very easy to do because of the new uploading positioning data button. Go ahead and click here, select Northern Colorado again for our location, and we're going to select that 400 to 450 export that we did. Now, one thing we want to make sure we do correctly here is this opens up both your subdivision / sub area and area label again. In this case, we're not looking at a location, so we want to make sure we type in the actual price range that we're searching. I prefer the longhand method because it does print on the graphs. If you want to say 400 or whatever your number might be, K for 1,000, that's always up to your judgment. I'm also going to type in southeast here just so that that shows up as well and it's very clear what we're looking at. I'm going to go ahead and click done, and that data now is loaded in here, and now we're ready to move on to positioning and move on to that next step, which is create a positioning scattergram. So now that we've exported and imported our search, let's go ahead and move on to creating our positioning scattergram. I'm going to zoom in here. You can see that they're automatically selected. So I'm just going to click Create Graph Options and click Create Scattergram Graph. And here we have it. Here is our first basic scattergram graph for positioning. You can see that the green properties are those that are for sale, and the yellows here, or the orange, are those that are under contract. Now that we have this, now it's time to go ahead and position to win and position to price on a bridge. And this is actually really a cool way to visualize how we're going to market our property and how we can see whether or not we're in the right place. So let's move on to that next step and position to win. Positioning to win is all about setting ourselves up in a competitive advantage and giving ourselves a good chance to sell. I mean, we can see here by clicking on the projected pond, we can see that, zoom in, that in the next 90 days, we're projecting 58 homes will sell, with 16 of those already under contract, 41 new coming in, and 8 available for sale. That means that 7 properties at the end of these 90 days will still be listed for sale and not selling. We don't really want to be one of those properties, especially in this case because our condition of our home is not the greatest. So we want to make sure we position ourselves during our current competition to get in a good spot where we're probably going to sell quicker and sooner rather than later. Otherwise, we might be in a spot we're not really wanting to be in, which is fighting against new listings, which could be great condition and put us into that 7 that don't sell. So let's look at positioning to win. Navigating back to the active data sheet here, one of the first things we want to do is add a subject property. Basically add a data point into this spreadsheet of the home we're pricing. To do that, we're going to click this Add User Property button. I'm going to type in the address. Again, this is not the address, but I don't want to actually list the true address yet. We can look back at that at the end and then see how well we price. But for now, I'm just going to call it 1234 Address Street, and I'm going to select the status of the property as subject. You can see now that there is the empty line up here. Now, we know that it is right around 3,000 square feet. It's actually, let me find the exact number, 2945. And we're thinking that we're probably going to list it around 425,000. So let's go ahead and put those 2 numbers in here. Let's recreate this graph. And this time I'm going to select Show Positioning Quadrants. This will give us a very easy to see visual representation of the subject property and how that competitive advantage situation currently sits. Let's go ahead and replace the first one. Open this up. And you can see here that the subject property is now listed and pretty easy to see as 1234 Address Street at 425 with the positioning quadrants. Now, as we look at this, we can see on this 425 range, this home that's currently for sale, we're going to be significantly more square feet, right? That's about 700 square feet for about the same price. Now, as I kind of looked around at this, if we look at that home that is for sale right now for the 425, we can see that they are a much smaller home, and at the same time, they are in a pretty good condition. So we're probably still beating them though because of the fact of the more square feet. That being said, these 3 dots are much closer to our square feet, only 200 away. And the question is, are we going to be in a good spot at 425, or do we need to move down to make sure that we are beating this property, or do we need to move up because these don't really pertain to us, and you can kind of see that maybe that would work on that trend. So this property here, which is currently listed as 429.9, if I look at that, this property is also recently remodeled. It's got another 2-car garage, but it's also got the stainless steel appliances, it's got hardwood floors and all that kind of stuff. So we don't want to move ourselves up to 430 or anywhere in that price range, because we're going to be fighting against a home that, although being slightly smaller, is in much better condition. Now let's look down at these two properties, this 419 and this 420. As I look at the 420, this new property is in great condition as well. It has a large living room, a walkout basement. It's got a nicely landscaped yard. It doesn't really need any fixing up. This property at 419, as I look at it, is also in a great area. It doesn't have as good of condition, but it has a 3-car garage. So the issue we're now running into is, if you look at these two homes, this is smaller but nicer condition. This house is actually smaller, not nicer condition, but has a better feature of a 3-car garage, while our home only has a 2-car garage. So the question here is, if a buyer was to see these 3 homes, let's say, which one would win? Now, in many cases, you'd say, well, this is bigger square feet, but at this point, it's bigger square feet for a higher price. So there's not really a competitive advantage there for us. If we were to move down to 420, looking at the condition of this being in great condition, now we're kind of more in a tie situation, whereas before someone might choose that. So looking at these things, we're going to look at how to position to win. We want to be on a bridge. Now, what do I mean by a bridge? I'm not going to recommend that we ever go down to 422.5, because people are probably searching at 420 and below, 425 below, or 415 and below. Now, judging by the condition of the home that we're looking at, theoretically we could be looking down at the 415 range. I don't have actual pictures of what the inside of this house looked like, and again, it's been a year now or longer since this was actually brought up. But looking at this in general, we don't want to be in a competitive disadvantage situation in buyers' eyes against these two properties. So let's go ahead and look at that and say, let's move this pricing down. And if we want to be in a position that is a little bit more advantageous to us, we're probably going to look more around the 420,000 range because of that condition. Now, if I could show you the condition of the home, you would understand why I'm saying this. But now you can see this property here is pretty clearly on the line where we can show, hey, these properties are the same price, but we are considerably larger. We might not have a 3rd-car garage, but what we don't have in the garage, we have in the house. So now we have an advantage situation where we can actually really talk about why this home should sell for here. So now we've seen this, now that we've gone on position to win, let's move on and print and compile this, and then let's see what this house actually sold for. So now that we've found a good advantageous place to price at, we have good data to show it up and kind of back up what's going on, let's go ahead and print and compile our report. Now, if you are on a PC, this is really easy. All you have to do is click print graphs, and you can select which ones you want to print. If you're on a Mac, you kind of have to either choose all or pieces of them at a time, but the only issue is it doesn't print to digital right off the bat. It only prints to a printer. So if you do want to print to digital and save it, which I kind of recommend doing because a lot of times people love seeing it online, seeing it on your tablet or your phone, and you want to add other things to it, we can do that after the fact. Like if you want to add your cover letter or MLS sheet to the public records, you can print that on a printer and then staple it together or bind it together. But if you want to do it in a digital format, the way we're going to do that is select multiple tabs at a time, which you can do by hitting Shift and selecting the whole range, or hit Command and select which ones you want. If you click Command Print or Command P now, or File Print, if you will, you can then save this as a PDF. Once we save this as a PDF, it shows up on our desktop or wherever we save it, and then we can add other documents to it pretty easily. So I'm going to show you that really fast, just how to add those documents together on a Mac. I'm going to save this as a PDF to my desktop really quickly. Okay, and I'm going to call this sample report PDF. Awesome, and that goes ahead and saves on my desktop. And let's say we want to make sure we added that positioning scattergram, for example. I'm going to go ahead and save this as well on my desktop as sample report 2, and that saves it. And now I'm going to show you really fast how to join those together very easily. Okay, so now zoomed in here on my desktop, you'll see these two documents, sample report and sample report 2. All you have to do is select both of them, right click, and under quick actions there is create PDF. Once you do that, a new report PDF is created that has all those in there. Now, in many cases, I would recommend adding your cover letter, adding the MLS sheets of the homes that you're kind of comparing to. That way you can show customers very clearly where you're drawing this comparative base price to and why you're recommending pricing where you are when it comes to competition and positioning to win. So simple as that. That is the last step of the visual pricing process. We've now gone through doing the Pricing MLS Search, uploading your pricing export, creating a correlated scattergram, finding your comparative base price, using that to dictate your Positioning MLS Search, bringing that back into the visual pricing system by uploading that export, creating a positioning scattergram, positioning to win, and making sure we price on a bridge, not in between those kind of commonly searched numbers. And now we've printed and kind of started stitching together our report. So now let's see here what that property actually sold like when it was listed. So using our pricing process, what we came to was the conclusion that you should be pricing at $420,000. Now, I didn't price this home when it went for sale. Okay, this is an example of a listing that I didn't actually price. But using that process, we found ourselves in a good position at $420,000, and we want to make sure that we price there because the truth is, if we are one of those homes that don't sell right away, we have another situation that arises. Now, the pond was always a great way to kind of talk about this because that muck and that mud at the bottom of a pond, if that gets on you, you have to really kind of work hard to dislodge the negative stigma. In many cases, if a listing sits for too long, especially nowadays with all the access to information, there's almost a negative effect it has on the value of the home. So selling it, you almost have to take a price cut. Now, that being said, let's look at the actual price history. Now, the listing was actually first put on the market here in July. So while the pricing that we showed you the example of in the search I have to kind of document this was done in March, 4 months later it was put on the market. Now, it was put on the market at $430,000, a whole $10,000 higher than I would have recommended. But at that same time, maybe things could have changed. I'm not really sure. And as we watch the statistics here and kind of watch what happened to the price, I don't think much changed. So looking at this, you can see that it went through a couple price changes until it got a contract offer at $419,900, right at our $420. So it actually ended up selling at $410, but that's what I'm talking about when it comes to that. If you don't price at market value, sometimes you have to pay the price. It's kind of one of those examples to look back on and say, in retrospect, I should have just stuck with the visual pricing process. Now that we've compiled all the graphs, we're ready to present to our customers. This process is so simple and so easy to follow, but it works for every subject property that you really want to use. Now, there are some cases where different searches happen, but the process stays the same. That's the real power of the visual pricing system. The graphs answer key customer questions and they work in unison to arrive at one final competitive market analysis. I hope this video helps you, and if it did, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more awesome pricing mastery videos.